I guess I'd like to just acknowledge first off that I was born about 5 kilometres across there in Waitakere Hospital, so I'm a local girl as well. Grew up in Massey. My father still lives in the house that I grew up in, so I'm staying with him this week. But at the moment, I'm sort of mostly living in Cambridge, sometimes on Waitakere Island, a bit of a nomad, and I do like to travel around a bit, which is part of what I'm talking about tonight. But thank you all for coming along to this talk. Okay, so World of Wetlands, yeah. Okay, which button am I pushing? The shift one?
Space.
Space bar? Okay, this is not my partner, this is one of the trustees of the National Wetland Trust. I worked for the National Wetland Trust for about 15, 17 years as their executive officer. So that's why I sort of started with that one. But moving on, I was very recently in July privileged to be able to attend the first Wetland Link International WELI Asia Oceania conference in Sri Lanka. And I attended on behalf of Matuku Link as an associate. So I went up as a volunteer, but Matuku Link did help me with some travel costs, as did the Ramsar Regional Centre in Korea, East Asian Centre. And WELI is the Wetland Link International is a network, global network of wetland centres and wetland educators. And who's British in this audience? Anyone born in England?
Yeah.
Probably know what wellies are.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've made that connection already. Wellies, Wellington boots, is gum boots. So it's a bit of a riff on the old gum boots, the organisation called WELI. Okay, so I'm dancing backwards and forwards so that these guys can see. So it was, as you can see, Matuku Link featured quite prominently, the t-shirt, of course, and Matuku birds that were gifted to two very good friends that I made up there. I was very privileged. After the conference, I just took a bit of my own time, had a little bit of a holiday, stayed with this family, and he said, you know, what do you want to do while you're here? I said, I don't know, entertain me. And he took me to local school and I had a poster, and I was able to give a wetland poster to the school children there, which they were quite excited about. And this over here, a bit hard to see, is Matuku Link's Wetland Link International Official Certificate. So I will pass it over to Josh. So something tangible that managed to come back in my suitcase that eventually arrived after, I don't know where it went, it was travelling around for about 3 weeks. That's Qantas for you. Okay. So let's just step back a little bit and just talk a little bit about what are wetlands. I'm sure just about everybody in this room who knows what a wetland is. We have an official legal definition in the Resource Management Act, which still does exist at the moment. And so wetlands are permanently or intermittently wet, or shallow water, or land water margins that support a natural ecosystem of plants and animals that are adapted to wet conditions. It's quite broad. And so most people, when they think about a wetland, they're probably thinking sort of a swampy, sedgy sort of place with open water, something like this, maybe flax cabbage trees. That's our classic kind of image. But of course, we have a lot of different wetland types in New Zealand, and this isn't the full range, but we've got geothermal wetlands, the Bay of Plenty and Waikato, huge big peat bogs. These are the superheroes in terms of carbon and climate, because they're sucking up carbon even now. In New Zealand, they're very actively taking up carbon and storing it permanently or indefinitely until we decide we're going to pull it out as coal or oil or gas and burn it in our cars. So they're the wetland heroes in terms of climate. Of course, our coastal wetlands, mountainous wetlands, we've got a beautiful range of wetland types in New Zealand. And of course, Māori valued wetlands hugely. They were really, really important storehouses, resource places, rich resource places for them to go to get food and fibre, dyes, a whole range of things. In fact, there's a really lovely, lovely chapter that I didn't write in the book about Mataronga Māori, how Māori interacted with wetlands, what wetlands mean to them. And it's so approachable. It's really, really interesting. It's fascinating. So very, very strongly valued by Māori traditionally. But when it comes to the Western world, This is how we've treated our wetlands, you know, quite negatively. Think about the words we use in English, you know, bog down, swamp of work, mud, a controversy, or stick in the mud, you know, great dismal swamp. How cheerful is that? Yeah, the creature from the Black Lagoon swamp thing. It's always been negative. It's seen as a scary, unapproachable place. Whereas for Māori, it was like, this is where we go to get our food, and these are, you know, this place is amazing. For the Europeans, when they came to New Zealand, they were just in the way, and it's like, let's drain them. And Trump's still talking about draining the swamp, isn't he? So we love our forest creatures. We love our kiwi, you know. Kiwi, longfin eel, same threats, both at risk of declining. One of them is a national treasure, and the other one, dog tucker. And you might think, well, that's the stream heron. Here's the evidence. Addiction pet food made in New Zealand. With pure, it's hard to read because it's a little bit out of focus here, but it talks about New Zealand eels caught in our pristine lakes and rivers, and it's really great for your dog. So we are actually exporting a threatened species, a species as threatened as kiwi, in a can for dogs to eat in America.
Oh, no.
Could they be short-finned as well as long? Or what?
Could be shortfin as well, but they're exporting, you know, both going. And then Mike Joy had a bit of a go at them, as he does. He's brilliant, and they said, "Oh, we're just catching them sustainably, you know, under the New Zealand laws." That's fair enough, but how do you sustainably catch a threatened species? By definition, no, you can't do it sustainably. Otherwise, they wouldn't be threatened. Sorry, I get off on a bit of a tangent about that. If anyone buys addiction pet food, and I think my sister does, it's great because they do use pest animals. I think they have, you know, venison and possum meat. But write to them and say, stop putting threatened species as rare as kiwi, in your dog food cans. Thank you very much. Okay, get off my soapbox. So again, you know, we've looked after our forests. Okay, we have cleared a lot of forests, but we've still got 30% of our forests, 10% of our wetlands. We protected 80% of what's left of our forests, only half of what's left of our wetlands. So we've got rid of 90% of them, and we haven't even bothered to protect the half of what's left. So those statistics did make an impact. When the Resource Management Act came out in 1991, it made wetlands, it sort of specified wetlands as a matter of national importance. Preservation of the natural character of wetlands, protect them from inappropriate subdivision, use and development. Fantastic. That's great, so we're all sorted. Except, blow me down, we've gone and drained another 6,000 hectares since then. So that came out, matter of national importance, let's just get rid of another 6,000 hectares. Where's it gone? What industry? Yep. Okay. And we're still at it. We're still at it. During lockdown, people were out there when they're supposed to be baking focaccia and zooming, out there with the diggers, draining wetlands. Good time to try and get away with it, eh? So that in 2020, it was the Labor government then, came out with even more stronger rules. So the RMA were principles, okay? They weren't laws as such. They were principles. It's a matter of national importance to protect wetlands. Labor turned it into law. It said, right, prohibited, don't even ask. Earthworks within a natural inland wetland, if it's going to result in any drainage, don't even ask. You will not get permission to do it. Pretty strong stuff. So environmentalists were just hallelujah. Forest and Bird, you know, right up there with the Wetland Trust celebrating. And 2020, Coromandel, Forest and Bird called this in. This is a housing development, big housing company, mostly based in Queenstown. We're out there draining this wetland, diggers. And I mean, does that look dry? So someone from Forest and Bird called it in, put in a complaint to the council. regional council went to the district council, who sent out someone who knew nothing about native plants, obviously, or wetlands, and just said it was just a bunch of scrub and some tree ferns and stuff. And so Forest and Bird wouldn't take no for an answer, and pestered. But I'm going to pop back to this one, I think, in a little bit. Let's just stop for a minute and think about, why does any of this matter? You guys all know this, because you wouldn't be here, right? You already know why wetlands are important. But this is a series of nice little posters that the National Wetland Trust has created. So if it's of use to you in any of your marketing type stuff, you can probably get it off the website. So they're culturally significant, we know that. They're nature's home. So many of our species live in them, and quite a high proportion of them are threatened with extinction. Now, there's no surprises there. When 90% of your home's gone, you're going to be struggling to survive in the population numbers you're used to. And there are climate regulators. I mentioned that before, about those big peat bogs sucking up 5 tonnes of carbon per hectare per year. I think Kapurtai is about 10,000 hectares, so someone else can do the maths, quite a lot. And the peatlands globally store twice as much carbon as all the world's forests, because that's where it stays permanently in the forest. You know, they can't recycle it, turn it over. They're nature's shock absorbers, and you probably remember that terrible Boxing Day tsunami through Asia. There was really strong evidence came out that where villages were protected by mangrove forests, the waves were attenuated and the damage wasn't as great, and the life was preserved. There are natural filters called the kidneys of the land. We shouldn't use our natural wetlands specifically for this function. We shouldn't be pouring filthy water into our wetlands and you deal with it. But we can create wetlands, we can construct wetlands to do that, and we can celebrate that the wetlands out there are doing that. So they're stripping out the nitrates and other pollutants that protect the streams downstream, the lakes downstream, the ocean. And a lot of that nitrate removal is actually because the plants, they provide a home for the bacteria that denitrifies. So it's living on the stems of the plants, those bacteria that do that job. Okay, so a lot of people are going, well, what can I do? And you probably do a lot of this stuff already. Supporting your local wetlands, going out to Matuku Link, doing some planting, all of that stuff, we know that. Donating to wetland charities, buying books. And this, really important, telling everybody. We need to just up the literacy rates in New Zealand about this. You probably know all about this, checking your council websites, finding out if they're notifying applications are coming through that might affect a wetland. Because in some situations you can still do things that might harm a wetland. You might not be able to drain it, but you might be able to do other things that affect it. It's worth keeping an eye on your council's long-term plan, because that's where the money that ultimately you guys apply for grants, that's, you know, steps back, 3 years back sort of thing, that goes into a long-term plan somewhere. So as the community go along, I know it's boring as, I won't say the word, but go to your council meetings and say, you know, we want provision for funding for community groups, for doing restoration, all that sort of stuff. And of course vote, and maybe even stand. Bruce Clarkson is a regional councillor in the Waikato now. It's amazing. And then that last one, report wetland damage immediately to the regional council. And if you think that's not going to make a difference, that wetland that I showed you before, that one in the Coromandel that Forest and Bird called it in. So when I first went, I was asked by the council to go and inspect it as a contracted ecologist, and they'd left all the slash and stuff. Mostly what they knocked down was, tree-wise, was gum trees, but it was a swamp gum, so it was a wetland. So this wood that's all stacked up is a eucalypt, but they'd stacked that all up and they'd get mulch piles, and the council made them, once they'd had me in there, I said, no, there's definitely a wetland. Agree with me, Graham, 100%, it's a wetland, and here's the evidence. And we even got DNA samples from the water to say, and it's got animals in it as well, because we have to prove that now as well, because the RMA. So I took that photo when I first visited, and the council made them do a little bit of a tidy up, get rid of some of the slash. And that's a year later.
Wow.
That's a year later.
You go back to the other one.
Can I go back?
Same direction, same direction.
Pretty much, which is the back one. That one?
Left button.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is it?
Yeah, so you've got that,
Fuck's sake.
that stand, there's,
Yeah.
it's a slight angle around, so some of that, that's all gone, and the water's gonna come back in.
But who owns the
That's
land
it
in the
now.
first place?
So it was owned by a housing company called Winton. This is under a legal proceeding at the moment, so I don't know, are you filming?
Yes.
Don't be careful what I
Yes.
say. Okay, so, but that's public knowledge, that's been in the papers. So Winton have been doing a lot of housing subdivision developments in the Coromandel, and they had their eye on this site, so they owned the land, and they just got in with some diggers, and you saw, they took all the eucalypts out. What's happened here is all of this stuff has come back on its own. That's not planted. So they got rid of the mulch piles and left some holes, which are filled up beautifully
Did
with
they
water.
dig extra holes? Did they dig some?
Well, when they scraped back the mulch, those holes were kind of,
Okay.
you know, like there, so they revealed them, and there's still some mulch piles that they've got to get rid of. And it's just, this is nature, you know, because a lot of these plants have underground runners, and so they were still there, thankfully, and they were able to come up and really quickly, and it's just, it's beautiful, isn't it? And that's because of Forest and Bird putting in a complaint. If they had it, that would now be houses. Guaranteed. Guaranteed, that would be houses.
And getting flooded on it.
And getting flooded, yeah. And putting our insurance premiums up. So I did not see eels. When I went out, there wasn't much of a wetland left. There was a pair of paradise ducks looking a bit confused. And because we had to prove this, I went on there with a police escort and a council inspections officer. And the council, regional council in Waikato, were very clever. They employed ex-biosecurity and police officers to be their inspections people for when there's been a breach, an environmental breach. And so he was brilliant. He said to me everything you need to do. You know, you need to be writing it this way. And he's the one who said, you know, the RMA says it has to be supporting plants and animals. Going, yeah, but no one ever, because the RMA says it's plants and animals. And going, I was hoping no one would ever realise that, but yeah, okay. Let's get some DNA samples out of the water and we'll prove there's a whole bunch of little copepods and other little invertebrates there. So we did that, but I didn't see any eels. Okay. Yeah, international links. So that's what I'm here for. Can anybody name this bird?
Yes.
Yeah? Any other names for it?
Cool.
Any other names for it?
Eastern bar tail.
Eastern Bata, any other names for it? Okay, it's Kuaka. It's also Te bark. Okay. Took me all afternoon to learn that. And a
Oh,
choo
goodness.
choo chuck. So those names are every bit as valid as Kuaka or Godwit. This is the Inuit or the Yupik names for these birds. And the reason is pretty obvious, because this is a bird that utilises two hemispheres. So it's not our bird, it's not their bird, we share it. It's its own bird, really. But that's a really important thing about why we need to have international links, because these birds don't recognise borders, and they need us to cooperate to protect their hubs, their stopovers, their refuelling spots, because they're like a big international airline. You know, they need all of those parts to be maintained, all steps along the way, and then back again. Otherwise, we're not going to see them if they get rid of their wetlands, or they get rid of their wetlands. It's just going to break that chain up. So it's long been recognised that we need to think about international cooperation when it comes to these birds. And that's why we have this convention, which is sometimes called the Ramsar Convention, because the actual full name of it is the Convention on Wetlands of International Importance, especially as waterfowl habitat, which is just about passing out trying to say out loud. So we call it the Ramsar Convention. So really, that was the ornithologists of the world saying, we guys need to cooperate, and getting their governments behind them. And the governments got together and signed the Ramsar Convention in 1971, and New Zealand joined it pretty early on. I think, well, we were there actually. So the mission statement for the Ramsar Convention is the conservation and wise use of all wetlands through local and national actions and international cooperation. It's a contribution towards sustainable development. And the wise use doesn't necessarily mean going in there and extracting tuna and putting in dog food cans. It's uses that are benign or in keeping with the wetland or part of a culture that's been happening for so long that the wetland ecology is now completely intertwined with the people who live in or around those wetlands. So it could be tourism, could be planting, could be education. And I guess I wanted to reiterate, these conventions, they sound like it's just big talk fests, and these governments every 4 years, government representatives go off somewhere flash and spend a lot of money and just talk. Ramsar is quite an active convention. It does a lot of things, so it produces a lot of material. It's well worth having a look on their website. It used to be just hideous colour scheme. I don't know who designed it. It was like something a 6-year-old would come up with, but it's actually improved a lot. But there's a lot of really useful information on there. And they have awards and grants, so it's worth looking into those. They organise these flyway initiatives for the migratory birds. So these are East Asian, AF Pacific flyway, part of that our region is part of. Ramsar Wetlands, you might be familiar with it, I'll touch on that. Wetland City accreditation, you might not be so familiar with. Has anyone heard of that? No? No. Nice. Ramsar in persona. Well, Wetlands Day, I imagine you guys have all heard of that. And then the Wetland Link International, which you now know about, Asia Oceania is one of their initiatives. So our Ramsar sites, we've got 7. Cuba's got the same number, so it's not like we've done super well. No, I mean, could probably do a lot better. I think Norway, same population as New Zealand, similar size, 50 odd, yeah. It's quite hard getting the conservation with these things. And I was employed by DOC to help develop some guidelines to try and make it a little bit easier, but DOC's just so stretched resource-wise, it's just really hard, and it's a lot of work to get a site through the Ramsar process. Not the Ramsar part of it, that's easy, you just send your forms off and they tick it pretty much, they're delighted. But all the bits nationally that have to happen. And it's even harder now because we have to get the Minister of Primary Industry sign off and MB sign off, because some of these sites, these ones, got all these nice coal reserves, you know, so it's not just DOC who gets to say we want to have this as a Ramsar site, or the community. It's got to go through some other processes at the moment. So it's worth looking into, but it can be a bit tough to get through that process. Anyway, so we've got Wetland Trust website's got some really great little descriptive pages on those Ramsar sites if you want to learn a little bit more about them. And the Ramsar cities, the Ramsar accreditation process is quite new. So it started in 2018. It's voluntary, it's just about all of the parts of the Ramsar Convention are. It's an opportunity for cities that value their natural or their human-made wetlands to gain international recognition and sort of warm fuzzies, positive feedback for their efforts. And here's a map of them, and there's a cluster of them in Asia. So they really embrace this concept. I don't really see any dots in New Zealand. In Australia, they usually jump all this sort of stuff. No, not much in North America either. So I just put a little circle around Colombo, which is where the conference is that I went to. So Sri Lanka, Ceylon, the beautiful little teardrop island nation below India. And Colombo was, they call themselves the world's first Ramsar wetland city. They're the first capital city that's a wetland city. So there's about 18 of them that became Ramsar cities in one hit. But they were the first, it was a capital city to become a wetland city. And they weren't always, you know, so, well, I guess when I went to the conference, the pride in that, and it was quite remarkable. And I'm not just talking about the local people. So when we got to the airport, this big long road as you come out of the airport, all the way down this road, like there must have been about 8 or 9 huge big banners saying, welcome delegates, Willie International, you know. And I was like, what? This is weird. It was opened by the Prime Minister, this conference. The conference dinner was hosted by the President. And yes, he was there. We got to meet him. All their dignitaries turned out for this conference on wetlands. You imagine, like, you know, you might be lucky if you get the Conservation Minister to come along to something like that, but they were so proud of this, and they were just so wanted to show us, being the world, what they were doing in terms of their wetland city. But of course, they weren't always like that either. They drained a lot of their wetlands as well. So something triggered that. And you probably guessed what it was. That was 2010. They had a devastating flood. 18 people lost their lives. Thousands and thousands left homeless. Estimates of damage, 50 to 100 million US, I think. Pretty bad. And after that event, questions started being asked, and people started talking about, well, what's the role of wetlands in all this? And headlines started appearing. The World Bank noted that the wetlands in Colombo play a really important role in flooding. They realised that. They put a lot of money into revitalising wetlands in Colombo. They lent it as a result of this. So they recognised the value of doing that work. People were saying, could we reinvent ourselves as a wetland city? It was 2017, before the accreditation process came out.
13th of February 2018.
2018, so around about that time. And they're starting to see headlines like, you know, urban wetlands management, Colombo, new model for urban resilience, new model. Sri Lanka wetlands float to the top of the flood prevention plan. They were seeing the role that wetlands play in the flooding. And they developed a strategy. They call it, you know, the most comprehensive, first of its kind in the world, maybe, but you know, I'd be proud of it. Good on them. A comprehensive strategy to restore wetlands in Colombo and to make them accessible to people so that people could experience them, enjoy them, revere them, and respect the role they play. And research conducted afterwards showed it was exactly the right thing to do. They did a whole bunch of modelling, and they showed that the flood risk increases, this is modelling, when you take wetlands away in Colombo. And that stopping wetland encroachment, so development into wetlands and draining them, was the most effective thing that they could do. It was more cost effective than trying to put in all this infrastructure. So they were comparing that natural, you know, nature's sort of green infrastructure against the hard engineering one, and the wetlands won out. And New Zealand knew this 35 years ago. Tom Kay from Forest and Bird pointed this out fairly recently. After Bowler, papers were written and they were saying, you know, we need to protect wetlands. You know, getting rid of the wetlands is increasing the flooding problems. 35 years ago, we knew that. And yet, what had we done? We had our own floods. So Colombo had floods shortly after. Those headlines came out fairly shortly afterwards about, you know, we need to look at protecting the wetlands, sponge cities, all that sort of stuff. And what do our headlines look like? Possibly bad timing and, you know, change of government direction, but they don't look like the sort of headlines that are understanding that actually, we need to be protecting these wetlands, we need to be putting more of them back. We need to invest in our climate research and in our restoration projects. And so this is why I come back to what's known in the Ramsar circles as SEPA, which is the education, awareness, the participation, all that amazing stuff you're doing out at Matuku Link. And it needs to happen at all levels. So, you know, schools, definitely children, and they will influence their parents. It's not like we have to wait 10 years for them to become voters. You know, they can be influential, but, you know, there's education needed at all levels. And I'm very proud to say I had a Zoom session with David Parker. Not the Carter's one when running during COVID, wasn't it? Parker, Environment Minister. Must have been when Labour was still in. And we were talking about wetlands and bought a copy of my book. And apparently he really loves wetlands. So you can still get the adults excited about as well. Just a few pickies from some various Ramsar wetland events. So wetland centres. Let's talk a little bit about this. Yeah, I'm always travelling. I was in Australia after the Sri Lanka was kind of a last minute sort of opportunity. I wasn't planning on that. I was planning to go to the Northern Territory and went to Kakadu, and they've got a pretty awesome wetland centre. I love these sort of like perspective panels. They had some above you as well, so it felt like you were in the water looking out. Anyway, so wetland centres. So New Zealand's got around, I think, about 7, my count. I don't know if you guys know of any others. So I took this slide up to one of the meetings that we had with Wetland Link International, and you guys are up there, of course.
Yes.
Yeah. This is different.
Yeah.
Cool. And I guess it's nice to think that actually you're part of a worldwide network. There's about 357 wetland centres on the Wetland Link International website. You're about page 15 or something. So it's quite informative. Sorry, yeah.
What's the definition of a wetland centre?
It's very inclusive. So it could be a shed. It's a place where you take people to teach them about wetlands, or where people can go and explore them. They're very, very open, and they know everyone's starting on a journey. And so it's not necessarily the Hong Kong $50 million world.
So it's an educational place rather than natural nature place.
It's a place where
a swamp is a swamp.
Yeah.
But a wetland centre isn't a swamp. It's an educational place. Is that right?
That's right, and it could be at a wetland centre. Some of them aren't in wetlands at all. But it's a place where people can gather to learn about wetlands, and where there is some sort of formal organised sort of things going on that are teaching people about wetlands. It's quite an interesting website to have a look at, especially you guys. Every one of these, you click on it and it's got a little blurb about what they do and some cool little ideas, activities. So even though it's 350 to go through if it's a rainy day, pick off 10 or something. Okay, yep, there you are. So Welly, what else can Welly offer? This is this is a map of all those wetland centres that signed up to Welly. So quite a few of the New Zealand ones are now, and you've got your certificate, which is cool. Money, yes, only small, but so that's probably, you know, worth signing up for in its own right, that you get the opportunity to apply. Okay, you're up against 350 other wetland centres, but New Zealand's pretty hot at the moment, so yeah, you know, rate your chances pretty good actually. So it's too excited. But yeah, small grants. Welly's, it's all run out of a wetland centre in the UK that was started off by Peter Falcon Scott. Yes. Yeah, Slumbridge. So it's been there a long, long time, and it's just amazing that it has all this outreach around the world. So that's where Welly's based in the UK. They have a Star Wetland Centre program, and that's just kind of a pat on the back, kind of a nice plaque that you can stick on the Wetland Centre and say, hey, look, I'm internationally recognised. It's kind of nice. They have a Ramsar culture network, and I've had a little bit to do with them. But also, as I mentioned, that Welly Asia Oceania, that's one of the projects that they're really supportive of running. And so back to the conference. I think I was in gumboots earlier that day planting, so as you do with wetlands. And there's a Ngātuku Link presentation being given. It was, I guess one thing I want to say about Sri Lanka is that it's just, it's a really beautiful country and really amazing people, great food, wildlife is pretty exceptional, and they've got leopards and bears and elephants, which is kind of a weird combination, urban fishing cats, and I do encourage you to go there. Sri Lanka's had a really tough time, and I'm sure a lot of you know the history there, 30 years of terrible civil war, and the guy I went and stayed with who's building a little eco-accommodation place, his father lost his arm, the Tamil family lost his arm, so that was the income of that family, and the guy who's the son's now adult just pushed himself through education, pushed himself to get out there and get some money, and went back to his village, bought some land, and he's employing this person over there to do the cooking, and this person over there is kind of running the trips into the national park nearby and being the guide, and he's training himself up to be a guide, wildlife guide. So really awesome person. So Sri Lanka's had a really tough time. They had the civil war, they had the tsunami, that Boxing Day tsunami, they had the terrible terrorist attacks shortly after, terrible one, COVID. So they're just so wanting people to come to Sri Lanka. They really want the tourism, so they kind of put it on for us. But I do have to say just how warm the people were, and I've made some really nice connections. And just a little story, when New Zealand and Australia joined Welly Asia, we became Welly Asia Oceania, that was up in the Philippines. Just after I came and talked to you guys, actually, the next day I flew out to the Philippines a couple of years ago, 2022. And so part of that conference, they took us to the Natural History Museum in Manila, and it's a very grand building, and they ushered us into this one room about this size. Slap bang in the middle is this massive crocodile. Lolong, his name. Famous, world's biggest crocodile. Obviously it's stuffed, but so everybody just kind of rushes to Lolong, and two of us went, oh, Rafflesia. And it was me and a woman called Namada, and we just seen, it was only a replica, but of the biggest flowering plant in the world. It was so much more interesting to us. And we were both over there kind of, and looking at each other like, oh. And so we just bonded in our commonality of loving plants. So she now has a Matuku toy, which she loves. And she's a biologist, obviously. And she works at one of the wetland centres there. So that was a bit of a digression, but anyway, so some of the takeaways from the conference. I always have to come up with takeaways. Okay, so I guess, obviously there's a really wide range of wetland centres, and, to come back to your question, from these massive high-tech to sort of the barely there ones that might even just be a few signs, interpretation signs. Obviously there's a wide range of ecosystem types that these wetland centres are interpreting. Some were volunteer only, some have just dozens of staff. Some free entry, some charging, some have got accommodation. It was quite a few of them had these sort of on-site schools that they kind of provided for, like it's immersion, kids would go there for a week or so. Some of them are single species focused, like an ambassador species, and the one of the spoonbills is just black-faced spoonbill or something, very adorable critter. It's one of those. A lot of them are sort of running citizen science or associating monitoring, so they're doing research. I think you guys are doing quite a bit of that sort of stuff as well, and training and a lot of hands-on activities. One of them in Hong Kong was designing a opera house. A whole range of things that people are doing. It's kind of cool.
What are the names?
That's a recipe.
I think it's for kids to learn, you put them in the mud and then you can learn the different footprints and so you know which bird that was. So you can become like a junior ranger.
Are they real or are they?
No.
Oh,
They're a bit smelly with it. Differences. Yeah, well, the species are a bit different. I don't want to say they're more engaging, but I did say that. This looks like one of those amazing journey things, you know. It's actually a composite of game cameras, but from the same spot in Colombo, a fishing cat, a mongoose, and a porcupine. So, kind of hard for us to compete with exciting things like that, but anyway. A lot of these African centres actually have government funding, which is interesting. The government's funding that. I'm not quite sure the reason behind that, but it's pretty cool for them. And I said some of them are very grand. A lot of them are based in urban areas, and that kind of makes sense. They've got big populations to support them, but also, you know, that's where they could bring people, a lot of people in at once to learn. I think they tended to have a bigger focus on formal education. That was just my sense. And running professional training courses. So training up rangers and giving, you know, they had certifications they could give out, that kind of thing. And one that was really interesting was some of them, because there's activities around their wetland that aren't sustainable, you know, harming the wetland, they would actually go out and teach the population alternative sort of ways of doing their harvesting, or you know, so they would go out to those communities rather than just having people come to them. So there's some good examples of that. Very engaged students, you know, very high respect for teachers, and I thought it was pretty cool that they get the older kids to teach the younger kids, and the older kids appreciate that they're developing leadership skills. So it's quite comprehensive learning. They're not just learning about wetlands, you know, they're learning all sorts of skills, management skills, presentation skills. You know, they get the kids to do presentations and communication skills. So that was quite an interesting one. The other thing that was quite striking is they have quite a strong focus on wellness and spirituality. And it's probably something we don't really do that much of in New Zealand. There's a bit of forest bathing, I think, that Century Mountain does. But this is a tourism program about sound and dance of the tidal flat and involving meditation, and I just thought it's quite lovely. It's just a different way of engaging. You know, we don't always have to be just kind of pushing science at people or, you know, conservation messages. Sometimes it's just about just enjoying that place and to touch people in all different ways. And I quite like this little idea of, not sure how it worked, but I guess you plug your headphones in, and there's all these different sounds from nature. People can just kind of listen to just engage in that way, just shut off from everything else that's going on. That was in Korea. There was a lot of things we had in common, of course. Just about everybody has indoor and outdoor displays. Quite a few have native plant nurseries, so doing the same sort of things that we have been doing here in New Zealand. So, you know, running talks and seminars, World Wetlands Day, very similar sort of ecotourism opportunities, conservation activities, and yeah, training and upskilling, and much we've all got the same problems too. You'll recognise most of those, so yeah. So we've got, you know, things we can share. So opportunities. Star Wetland Award, you've already got your application in. Yep. Just waiting for that nice little metal plaque to arrive. And there's just a little freebie thing you can get that you put it up on the wall and go, hey, look, we're part of an international network up there. And I mentioned the grants. There's small grants out there. They did provide funding assistance so they offset some of my travel costs to go to the conference. That money actually comes from Korea, and I'm not sure where they get it from, but South Korea. I'm not sure if it's government or sponsorship, that's what I'm trying to say. But they do have that funding assistance, so if any of you guys want to go to one of these events, they'll pay for one person per wetland centre. So that's like potentially 7 people from New Zealand they would 500 US or something, travel grant. This is kind of a nice idea of shared resources. And so like if you've got excess posters or something, or you've got a display and it's like, oh, we're going to get a new one, but it might be sort of generic information. The Ramsar Resource Centre in East Asia and Korea will arrange posting these things around the world. So you can say, oh, we've got this stuff, is anyone out there who wants it? And they'll cover the postage to send it away. So it's quite nice to recycle. But also you can share tech, that's just emailing something, right? There might be some software or some sort of techie thing that you've got. And for sharing ideas, they arrange staff exchange visits. And there's also potential to share interns. So, you've got young people who might want to be doing their world experience and they've been in Japan working, and then they want to go to the Philippines and then maybe Australia or maybe to New Zealand and work at a wetland centre each time. So, they can put that message out. And I just know when I was there and engaging with people and seeing kids interacting with wetlands there, I was thinking how cool it would be if we had some sort of sister city kind of thing going with Colombo and the children connecting with each other through Zoom. And saying, we went to a wetland centre today and we saw this, and what did you see? So I thought that might be kind of a nice thing to do. Okay, so just about there. So I'm just going to talk just real briefly about one initiative. So a group of women in Colombo, so Namada, who you saw with the Matuku, and Madu and Tetika, three amazing women, got together with other volunteers and other people that they knew, and they formed this organisation called Love a Tree Foundation, which is a lovely name. When they say it in their heavy Sri Lankan accent, it does sound like lavatory. So and there was an Englishman who pointed that out to them, but they thought it was funny. Anyway, so they started up just around the time COVID happened, and what they wanted to do was get kids in Colombo to go to wetland centres. So there's a few wetland centres that the government set up, right, as a result of all that flooding. They created this network of wetland centres, and so they thought, well, let's get the kids to these wetland centres as a school group sort of thing, and they were hoping to do that sort of thing, but then COVID, and so that all fell apart, and everyone was at home. And so they decided, well, let's just pivot, and everyone's on Zoom, so they created these 3 programs. I thought this was really nice. So they've got tailored for each age group. And so for the youngins, they've got a program called Wetland Tales. And then for the 10 to 14-year-olds, they've got Wetland Talks. And then for the older ones, it's Wetland Cafe. So it's more about, them engaging with each other. And they held 33 virtual sessions, reaching over 1,000 children. This is just kind of over COVID. Quite amazing. Amazing woman. And so these 3 programs, the Wetland Tales, go on Zoom, go YouTube Wetland Tales Sri Lanka, and watch. They're just adorable. So they had a teacher who voluntarily reads fairy tale sort of stories that involve wetland critters to little kids. And the little kids were all on Zoom, and sometimes it cuts back to them. And there's one where they're talking about fishing cats. And so there's the teacher, and the backdrop's a picture of a fishing cat, a drawing. And you can hear some little kid going, "There's a fishing cat in your bedroom!" And it's just really cute. And so they use these stories just to engage children. And usually they've got morals at the end. And while the kids are listening, they're also drawing. As part of their challenge is they have to draw. And so then at the end of the Zoom, they're showing their picture. Which is a bit like, what's that TV show? 7 Days, this is my picture. I thought that was just adorable. And it's just once a month on Zoom, very easy, very low tech. Just a volunteer who's reading a story to these children, and the children will sign up to it. And then they had the Wetland Talks, so that was a bit more educational science. And that was again Namada, the Rafflesia woman, and she just would, again, once a month, all these people would come onto Zoom and she'd be talking on some topic. So teach them how to observe birds or whatever scientific aspect it was. And then for the Wetland Cafe, again, it started with Zoom, but then they sort of got these older ones to sort of go out together and do social things together. But mostly it started off just through Zoom, just chatting about topics and letting them talk. And what they did to reach these people was they used existing clubs and networks. So kind of like you've got your junior Forest and Bird types, you know, getting those and using that as your channel and through social media, and apparently it worked really, really well. So they don't have a wetland centre, they don't have a physical centre, they make use of existing ones. That's pretty much enough rattling on for me. From me, this is a photo you'll recognise. I think you guys do some really cool stuff. John took me around just after the April conference, isn't it? Just after the wetland restoration conference. And I just really like what you're doing with things like, you know, birds up in the trees with banding and stuff like that. And that was stuff I was sharing back with Colombo. And one thing I did recently was send off a pack of ink cards, tracking tunnel ink cards, because I met a woman who's doing a lot of monitoring of this of the wetland critters, and I said, "Oh, have you ever used these?" And they'd never seen them before, so they were all excited about, "Oh, here's a new tool we can use to see what's been out there." Okay. Oh, just want to share this with you. Hope you can hear it.
I like grasshoppers. Yeah, my favorite wetland animal is the fishing cat. I like it because it's cute and fluffy and hunts down fish. My favorite wetland animal is probably the dragonfly because of its aerodynamic design, which can be used to make planes or any type of aircraft. The sound like the sound of the snake, like the frog croaks. When you sit down in a place like that with a chair, you hear everything except your mom screaming. Child can go to wetlands and pick up the garbage, plant more trees in the wetland, and also clean the water around it and promote like other children to also do the same. And I can also ask my parents to help me do that, and my grandparents.
People who are protecting and taking steps to conserve the wetlands and taking care of them, we are really grateful for them. My message to you is that the more you protect it, the more it saves for the future. So I think that's really cool, and I hope that it happens.
We really love what you all are doing, and I really wish you could continue this for younger generations, for us.
My message for you is that conserve more wetlands, find about more animals in the wetlands, and clean them up. Promote more opportunities for schools, clubs, and all other programs to clean them up. Give opportunities for them to clean the wetland, because I really love wetlands and I do not want anything to happen to them.
To all of you, I commend your service so much. Please take every opportunity you can. It will be difficult sometimes for you to continue, but please face all those difficulties. It's very important. Your service is very commendable and it's very important. Good luck.
Thank you.